Oh, that was Janet Jackson.
Oh my God, it's Janet Jackson. You're right. It's been so long. I was
Yeah,
like,
uh, wardrobe malfunction.
yeah, I was just naming like 90s pop stars basically until I got there and I missed.
1-2. Swinging a drive toward right center. Back goes Robert. Back near the stands. That ball is gone. A game-winning home run for Chris Morel. Can you believe it? Listen to this crowd.
Welcome back to the Brotherly Cubs podcast. I am John, and this is my brother Zach. We are your brothers who love everything Cubs baseball. If you enjoy talking about the Cubs, then hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and join us every week as we dive into the power, the speed, and the best team in the National League. We like to start off each podcast with a playful question for all 24 of our subscribers. Feel free to put your answer in the comments. Today, I ask you, Zach, if the Cubs were hosting the halftime show, which player or players would be performing?
Yeah, so the Super Bowl is in what we've got like 10 days left here. Pretty excited. If the Cubs were hosting the halftime show and they had a player that was going to perform, it'd have to be Chris Morel. He's been referred to as an electric factory.
Oh,
That
wow.
dude, he hit the walk-off home run against the Sox to come back, and his home run this last year, the audio of Pat Hughes calling that game is the intro for our pod. He's a really exciting player, and I think he's super topical this offseason. We talked about trades and stuff like that. I love that dude. He took off his jersey when he's running third. So
That automatically qualifies him as a rock star, right? For the artist.
was that Christina Aguilera or who was it? No, 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 it was J-Lo. J-Lo at wasn't that at the Super Bowl?
That
Or it was
took off
Justin
for third,
Timberlake
or
and
that was Janet Jackson.
oh my God, it was Janet Jackson. You're right. It's been so long. I was
Yeah,
like,
uh, wardrobe malfunction.
yeah, I was just naming like 90s pop stars basically until I got there and I missed.
But
So
he clearly reached for her boob, and so I don't know how that was a wardrobe malfunction, but
yeah, so we need someone to do that from the Cubs. I don't know if that's Bellinger and his wife or his fiance or
reenact
Shota.
the Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson Super Bowl halftime show.
They're like so old.
It
Janet
depends
Jackson
on
was
who
already
you're
getting
playing
older,
for.
so
I think it depends on who you're playing for, right? Like, are we playing a show for the Cardinals, or who are we? If we're playing for a rival or something like that, I'd maybe have Juliana Zobris there
Hmm.
just to torture them.
Yeah, it's awful. Benny and the Jets rendition. I think she's a universally hated name in the Cubs fandom for sure.
Yeah. I would probably choose Pedro Strop, just because I think at the time after the Cubs, he was pursuing, or maybe even while he was with the Cubs, he was pursuing a musical career. So
Yeah. Yeah, Pedro Strop. It's funny because Strop was really good back when Edwards was on the team. So maybe they should bring him back for like the MLB's version of a 10-day contract. But those two dudes were sick. Like CJ had that curveball, Strop had, I think like a splitter, I want to say. I mean, he had that nasty slider too. But those guys were fun to watch. Hector Rondon, and then obviously they needed like, another reliever, so they added Craig Kimbrell years ago, and then they ended up trading him for Nicky Two Bags and for perennially injured, perpetually injured Cody Hoyer. So, and it's funny, I was thinking about the guys that got DFA, the trio of Cubs relievers, Cody Hoyer, Ethan Roberts, and Brandon Hughes. So Ethan Roberts came back on a minor league deal, and it was just announced that Brandon Hughes went to the D-backs on a minor league deal. So I'm pretty bummed about that.
yeah, that is a pretty sad situation. I was hoping you could have bounced back with us on a minor league deal.
Mhm.
There's some other news around the league we'd like to get to as well. We obviously just heard the breaking news about Corbin Burns, the Milwaukee Brewers, obviously the ace of their staff, or was the ace of their staff. He was traded to the Orioles for two prospects, DL Hall and Joey Ortiz. My immediate reaction, Zach, was awesome. I mean, That puts the Brewers
Woo!
even higher up on the prospect rankings as far as like their top 100. And I think they have now, I think five or six of the top 100
The
prospects.
Brewers do?
Yeah. So
Mm,
while they did part with Corbin Burns, they also added to their prospect haul that they have. But my immediate reaction was that's awesome. He's no longer going to pitch against us in the NL Central. There's a lot of rumblings around the league that he could possibly reunite with Greg Counsell in the offseason. I'm Craig Counsell in the Cubs. So, keep an eye on that. Another headline that came about was Fox Sports MLB ranked the Cubs as having the number one most disappointing offseason. The Orioles were four. I don't know about that. That was after. It was before the Corbin Burns trade news. So maybe not anymore. They're not the number four most disappointing, but Cardinals ranked number six on having the most exciting offseason. Obviously, they added to their starting rotation.
mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts, Zach, on the Cubs having the number one most disappointing offseason? I mean, it's a little harsh, I think, maybe, but
Yeah.
it's
These are
just
tricky. It's harsh. These are tricky to rank because it's so subjective.
right.
Bleacher Nation created a lot of hype for this team, especially after the Craig Counsell signing. So if you look at as a team, I mean, we just talked about the Brewers. They lost Brandon Woodruff to injury, Corbin Burns through trade, and their manager Craig Counsell, who we talked about, is in the manager of the year voting every year. He's in there. It's not like he's a middle of the pack guy. He's seen as a top National League manager. So the Cubs, yeah, they went out and got a manager and they didn't make a lot of roster moves until literally this last month, January. I will say that was disappointing for us to wait so long, especially after the winter meetings. It's been a disappointing offseason for all MLB fans. If you look at the top 50 MLB trade rumors free agents, there's still plenty of guys available. Snell, Montgomery, Chapman, Bellinger. And the bullpen market finally started to move. There's still probably a few bullpen arms left. It's been a disappointing offseason for sure. I'm not sure about number one, but this is so subjective. And look at the O's at number four. I mean, that's how quickly this can turn in. And really, it's so disappointing that Burns, along with Bieber, along with Juan Soto did move, but Pete Alonso did not, and Emmanuel Clase. The list goes on about guys that were going to get traded and then didn't. There was a lot of hype around this offseason. So I will say for all fans, it's pretty disappointing. I'm not sure if it's the number one most disappointing. It's more so that we're in a big market and we could have done more, but we didn't make zero moves. A couple
At least
lateral moves here and there. So
yeah,
we'll
at least,
see.
at least we didn't lose our baseball team to another city, right? Like we didn't get,
Yeah, if you're
maybe
if
the A's are up there as far as like the worst off season, but I don't think we're number one.
right. I mean, you can be the Rockies, the A's, the White Sox, all these teams that aren't spending, that don't have a good outlook. We still have a good outlook.
Yeah.
The misconception here is that the farm system is so loaded that we have a lot of talent. They should have probably made a trade by now, and maybe they will. The Cardinals being number six is exciting is maybe it's exciting if you're over 60, or if you just love mediocre pitching. Michaelis is not a great pitcher. He's not a bad pitcher. He's certainly kind of middle of the pack. On a good team, maybe he's a three or four. But it seems like Sonny Gray was obviously a massive addition for them. But if you're looking at that, Michaelis is number two, and then where's Lance Lynn? Number three, Gibson's the back. I mean, adding Lynn and Gibson, okay, Gray was a great addition. But if you had a bunch of homegrown pitching where other pitchers, you lose Wainwright, you lose Flaherty, you lose Montgomery, and who do you get in return? Lynn and Gibson? you know. So I don't know if it's exciting. I don't even really know what they added offensively. I don't think they added much. So it, you
Right
know,
now, I believe FanDuel has the Cardinals ahead of the Cubs as far as finishing atop the division. Like you said, for me, they didn't make very splashy of moves, the
no,
splashy moves. Um, they maybe slightly upgraded their rotation a little bit, but they didn't move the needle, I think, as far as legitimizing themselves as a World Series contender or anything like that.
right.
From our perspective, obviously, we still have some moves to make. And I'm going to get into the the beef of our podcast today. So that's what are we going to do if in a nightmarish scenario that we don't sign Cody Bellinger? It's widely expected around the league that we are. Obviously, John Morosi has tweeted this out. Many people have tweeted it out, quite frankly. So we're going to take a look at from my perspective, what I feel like the starting lineup is going to be for the 2024 Chicago Cubs. So at first base, I have Bush coming in to play first base. I believe that he's going to make an impact at the major league level. Horner is going to be at second base. He's going to lock it down. Obviously, nothing's changing there. For me, at third base, maybe this is a little bit of a surprise, but I'm going to go with Matt Chapman. I think we got on a decent deal. My reasoning behind that is we don't exactly know for sure what we have in Matt Shaw. I'm really excited for him, but I think at least for this year, I think Matt Chapman could hold it down at third base pretty well.
Any thoughts about his qualifying offer?
I am a little bit hung up on that. I think we have a deep enough farm system that we could withstand that or withstand that. But for me, I feel like if we add Chapman to our lineup, I think he's going to bounce back and have a better offensive year. And obviously, he brings tremendous value defensively. So nothing is literally getting out of the infield if we add Matt Chapman to our already pretty stout defensive-minded infield.
Yeah.
Dansby obviously is going to hold it down at shortstop. Then you have Ian Happ in left field. PCA, I have him taking over center field. And then Seiya Suzuki in right field.
Yeah.
Miguel Amaya is our catcher. Obviously, none of these are really a huge surprise. And then for DH, I'd like to sign JD Martinez.
Okay. There's the other shoe.
So in signing JD Martinez, I've heard a lot about him, a lot of great things. He has a lot of pop in his bat still, even though he's aging. We could probably afford to sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal. And I believe that he's going to spread a lot of knowledge to the Cubs players, to the hitters primarily. And that's all I've heard is from JD Martinez, that he's a very knowledgeable player, and he whoever he comes into contact with, it seems like they're pulling knowledge from him and experience from him.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about the possibility of still adding him. He's obviously still on the market, so that could work out. For the bench, I have Christopher Morel, Pat Wisdom, and then Nick Madrigal and Topman holding it down. I do have some big trades that I like to see. Maybe they're pie in the sky type of deals, but I really want George Kirby of the Seattle Mariners. So what I'd like to see is Ballesteros, Mervis, Murray, and Wisniewski for Kirby. I think that would move the needle for them, for Seattle. It's a lot to part with for Ballesteros. I think there's a lot of hitting there, but I don't know about the defensive value as a catcher.
Yeah.
At least maybe another at first base or another position, but as a catcher, he's kind of blocked as well by Amaya. He could come up as a backup perhaps, but Mervis is really blocked. You've got Bush holding it down at first base, and then of course there's also Hayden McGeary, BJ Murray. I don't really see a whole lot of tremendous impact from him, at least this year or even next year. And Wisniewski, I think he needs to rebound his value a little bit. So I would maybe wait a little bit and see how he kind of factors into this year and how much he improves. So I think his stock kind of dropped a little bit over the last year or so.
Yeah, and it can be hard to trade a guy if they go out and put up a bad season, which is what he did. You could have traded him in 2023 off season after he put up really good numbers at AAA and the big leagues in it. They call it a cup of coffee rule. Just a cup of coffee. Didn't have that many starts down the stretch. I think maybe seven starts down the stretch. And uh he has good stuff. I think he is a good trade candidate. I think if they make a trade for Kirby, they may have to give up a little bit more just because the Mariners are they've got such good pitching right now. These guys are putting up good numbers. I think you have to give up like a higher level prospect, but I like the idea that you're going with like guys that are blocked because they do have a lot of high quality prospects that are being blocked right now. So it's interesting.
I also have another trade. So Kevin Alcantara and James Triantos for TannerScott.
Ooh, I like that.
So I feel like, no, I'm not entirely sure what TannerScott's contract looks like or if he has controllable years, but I don't believe he does.
Hmm.
I think he's 7 or 8 years into the big leagues. But I think if you part with those guys, Triantos has tremendous trade value right now.
Hmm.
Alcantara also, I don't think obviously he's not going to impact the big leagues this year. Maybe next year, but for
That
me,
would free up a 40-man spot too with Alcantara. He's on the 40-man roster, which is kind of insane, but that's just the nature of the Rule 5 draft.
yeah, that is pretty insane. So that would free up a spot for TannerScott. I think if you're able to add those two pitchers, obviously, like you said, the George Kirby trade would probably require another big piece. But I think
Hmm.
it would be impactful. You get a very strong starting pitcher, high strikeout to walk ratio. I think he had the highest, I believe,
Yeah.
in the major leagues. So two huge trades, but I think they would have tremendous value for us moving forward. If not this year, then significantly, in the future.
Yeah, and then you'd have to go ahead and extend Tanner Scott to make that trade worth it. And if you did that, it's unlike Jed or this front office to extend relievers. So I'm curious as to how that'd work if they traded for a guy on an expiring deal. Do they go out and keep him? If they could keep him, that'd be great. But I would like to add back end bullpen talent. And I think a trade like that could happen, hopefully with less talented prospects if it's a rental in July, let's say. But the Kirby thing is enticing because the Cubs needed to grab two starters this offseason. They didn't. But I've got a solution to that. So I also was thinking about if the Cubs were to not sign Bellinger, they would sign Matt Chapman. And I took some notes here and I thought, what does that look like? I'd like a 3-year deal, maybe 2 years with a club option. He's going to demand higher money per year since it's only a 2-year deal. If they did that, if they added a guy like Chapman, they're very right-handed, so they'd have to give Mervis a chance to DH at times with Morel, and that could potentially give them another left-handed bat. So you'd have PCA, Michael Bush, and Ian Happ, and then a guy like Matt Mervis slotting in every now and then to have four lefties in your lineup. Otherwise, you have at most three, which isn't very many. So righties could really carve you up if you don't only have a few lefties or a couple lefties in your lineup. Like you mentioned, Chapman's a great defender. He's better than Magical, better than Wisdom. Actually, he'd be the best third base, easily your number one third baseman on the team. So if they did a deal like that, I like them to go buy cheap. I'm going to say his name again. I've said it 3 or 4 times in this pod, Brandon Woodruff. If they could get him on a 2-year deal with Chapman, since you're sacrificing a little bit of the offense, but then you get a pitcher for 2025 that's going to be lights out, that to me would be worth it, even though he wouldn't pitch that much this year. And I agree that Matt Chapman would rebound a little bit. Some numbers that I see on Fangraphs is that he had his best career year in hard hit percentage at 56%. He's 48% on the year, so he improved there. Barrel percentage, that's another metric. He was at 17%. So he improved his barrel percentage over the last couple of years. His average went up a little bit. His slugging was, it was down, but that's the whole point of this, right? Exit velocity, launch angle, barrel, yada yada yada, statistics, econometrics, blah blah blah,
Chapman's
calculus.
also very hard. He hits the ball pretty hard, right? I think you mentioned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Matt Chapman had a down year in terms of OPS, but what's not the numbers aren't showing is that 755 OPS is the hard hit rate, right? So maybe there is some regression to return back to him.
To your point,
Um,
Belt had a pretty decent OPS as well, right?
did you say BrandonBelt?
Yeah. Like last
Yeah,
year.
that's actually my next guy on here. And one caveat for the two is they both have high strikeout rates, which is not something with Chapman that will the qualifying offer, which gives up a compensatory, second round pick, whatever it is, that will certainly hurt his value over a contract. But BrandonBelt does not come with one, and his strikeout rate's similar, but his career walk rate's 13% career walk rate. So he strikes out a lot, as much as Chapman, if not a little bit more. But what they've done with BrandonBelt is even though the Giants and Blue Jays, when they had him, he hasn't gone over 500 bats in 4 years. So he's become a platoon infielder and DH, which is fine. The Cubs can use him in that role, and that would give you another left-handed bat if you don't sign Bellinger. So then you'd have, the four lefties like we talked about. Now, this is my pie in the sky type situation. If you sign BrandonBelt, he's going to take a 1 year deal, maybe worth less than 15, maybe 10 million a year, right? So then I'm going to say go and get Jordan Montgomery. I don't think they'll do it, but I think that would be a tremendous idea if you go and sign. Think about this. Bellinger might take 6 or 7 years for 170, 160, somewhere in that ballpark. If you get BrandonBelt in a 1 year, 10 mil, you've got so much money left to spend to even hit the luxury tax. Spend that on 25 million a year on Jordan Montgomery. Give him a contract. Okay, and the downside is you have a lot of lefties. But Jordan Wicks may not stay in the rotation. You could trade him if you're like, oh, we have too many lefties. Oh, what a crime. Go in the bullpen. Go in the bullpen. Trade him away. Trade him in a package like you mentioned with Wesneski or in place of Wesneski with a bunch of dudes and get a right-handed reliever. If you trade it for Kirby and you sign Montgomery, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but just in theory, if you sign a guy like Montgomery, that opens up all of your depth to be traded. Steele, Montgomery, Imanaga, and Cade Horton. That's a ridiculous rotation. You've got dogs, guys who can strike guys out, experience in the postseason with Montgomery. I think the Cubs should do something like that if they don't get Bellinger. Either go for Chapman or go for Montgomery and add left-handed power. I did like that you had JD Martinez in there. I think we've pretty much hit on all of the guys that the Cubs have left to get. And it's all like we talked about, the top, 5 or 6 free agents remaining in that top 50 list. If you can't get Bellinger, get one or two of those dudes. Get Belt, Martinez, Chapman, Montgomery. Find a way to grab a couple of them and get creative with it. Or just go get Bellinger.
Yeah.
Go get Bellinger on a reasonable deal. The I'm trying to remember who. Oh, the Angels signed Aaron Hicks as well. So that's something we forgot to mention earlier. But that takes them out on Bellinger. They were maybe the only other team that was going to go and hit that 200 mil asking price. So,
Yeah.
who's left to bid on them? Ourselves? I mean, the Giants, the Blue Jays. These guys already filled their team out. And if the Giants get Matt Chapman, they're doubly out on Bellinger. They're so out on Bellinger. And so are the Blue Jays. What are the Blue Jays going to do? Are they going to go above the luxury tax to finish third to the now Corbin Burns heralded Orioles?
There's
And the
no,
Yankees,
yeah, there's almost no negotiating power, I think, for Scott Boras when it
right.
comes to. And if I'm Matt Chapman, honestly, if you think about it, look at the division, right? It's a very tough division.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. The
at least
Giants,
for the Dodgers. I don't know about the Padres necessarily. They've got a really good relief core now. But
Diamondbacks,
Diamondback, yeah, I forgot about the Diamondbacks. I mean,
Dodgers, Diamondbacks, and then
yeah,
Giants are
that's
maybe third or fourth. Yeah. You're going to the
a
Giants,
really
you're asking to lose, basically.
it's a gauntlet right there.
But
We all know how crappy it is in San Francisco right now. I mean, as far as, signing as a free agent, but
yeah,
that's, It depends on how you look at things. I honestly think Matt Chapman would have the best chance of advancing to the playoffs and maybe moving on past that first wild card round with the Cubs. And
Yeah.
you're talking about some of the best fans or the best fans in baseball, the most passionate fans in baseball, maybe in all of sports. So
The Central is very winnable right now, and Chapman could rebound his value with those alleys at Wrigley. Could hit a little bit more home runs there. It's a better fit, but I'm not sure the Cubs are wanting to give him like 60 to 70 million, you know.
yeah, good
We'll
point.
see.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us here on the Brotherly Cubs podcast. If you have thoughts on today's podcast, comment them below. Or if you have another interesting topic, let us know. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, or join the conversation with us on Twitter at Brotherly Cubs or Spotify, also at Brotherly Cubs. We are also on Apple Podcasts now, so check us out. I am John, and that's my brother Zach, and this has been the Brotherly Cubs podcast. We will see you next week. Peace.
Listen to this crowd.